Hey, how's it going? We're back live, day 2, building muster minutes. Let's just check, see everything working. Oh, sweet. Let's get into it. Yeah, so yesterday we kicked off kind of building muster minutes, this new tool that I'm working on to help record minutes for meetings. Turn meeting recordings into helpful minutes with the help of muster minutes. Yesterday we kind of went through a couple of things. We set up a bit of a Miro board, a little bit of a whiteboard, and we mapped out the flow for our app. And then we also mapped out kind of entities that we're going to be building in our application. We mapped out what some of the data structure might look like there for those things that are going to exist within our application, building out a domain. We set up a new Rails app. We used Tailwind and Postgres, and we also set up RSpec as well. Then we started setting up our kind of front end style kind of framework using Cube CSS, mixed with Tailwind as our utility class generator. And that's where we kind of left off yesterday. I think we had this application running, and we were setting up our design system and tooling around that. So I think I'm just going to get straight into that, and we're going to continue coding where we left off as we go through. Obviously, if anyone jumps in, then feel free to follow along and comment and whatever. Yeah, we'll jump straight into it. Cool. So yesterday we were setting up tokens. We set up our fonts. That was the last thing we did. We left ourselves a little to do to remind ourselves where we were getting up to. And what we wanted to do was try and figure out a way to add our font token values to CSS variables so we can use them in our kind of code up here. Really, we want to be able to say font base up here. And so that's all handled by this plugin here. And let's take a quick look at how this plugin works, because it's been a while since I looked through this code. I took this from we talked about this yesterday. We took this from the Andy Bell, who wrote Build Better Websites website, and he had that in there as a plugin for his Tailwind config to make it work with Cube CSS. So what have we got here? So we had we've got our result, which is the kind of end result. So it looks like here what this code is doing is it creates a bunch of CSS variables. So when we look at our website here and we kind of view HTML, you see this code here. All of these are being generated by the code that we're looking at. And how that works is we have a set of groups that we're going to loop through. We've got colors, and that prefixes with the word color. So for each group that we've got, and in this case it's just going to be colors, we take the key. So the key here, colors, and we grab that from the current config theme. So current config is whatever is in the Tailwind config so far. So we set the theme colors there. That's grabbing it from there. So that basically is pulling from here. So whatever's going in here is what this group is. And if there's no group, we return. That's fair. Then we get the keys for that group. So let's just take a look. In our case, we have colors. Font family is pulled in from this tokens to Tailwind. Now, I don't really want to have to work out what that looks like, but what we'll quickly do is check the Tailwind docs and see the theme configuration. How does font family work? So font family is an object where we have keys, sans, and serif. This is going to be our group key or group name key here. So, and there's a bit of a problem with this code because this key here gets replaced, and that's not particularly useful. So, and actually, this isn't the key of the group anymore. This is a key of like the theme or like the space. So. But let's not worry about refactoring it right now, I think, but just something to be aware of, that actually this changes the value of key. And then we have prefix. So prefix in this case is going to be color. And the key in this case for colors, it would have been like porcelain. And actually it does something here, whereas if that's a string, what we get is the prefix and the key, and we get the value. Now this string here, group key. Group here recurs to the theme. And so I think this would make sense for something like spacing, perhaps, where, well, colors make sense because it's actually colors isn't picked up by this. So I think colors goes through this one where we loop through all of the keys in that. So this could be an array, or this could be an object. If this is an object like it is for colors, then we're looping through and we're doing the sub key. And so this is what creates color porcelain 500, and then grabs that value from the group key sub key. So this is what's happening with our font. And I think what we really need to do is add a else if, and then something in there like that. A bit of a drop there. Cool. If it's a type of, I think I can do like if array is array group key. So if this is an array, actually what we probably want to do is I want to do the result plus equals, yeah, something like that. How do I want to comma separate? Do we comma separate the values there? I think so. Let's try that and see how that goes. So what we're saying is if it's a string, we're just going to put the string in there. If it's an array, we're going to merge all of the things together with a comma separated list. Hopefully that should cover most of our use cases where we have an array as the value. Otherwise, we're going to assume it's an object and we're going to get sub keys from that object. Cool. The other bit we want to do is just use that. So let's font base in there as the variable. And so let's just take a look. So we're not seeing it in here at all. Perhaps we've got an error in our... We'll have to reload this because we've changed our Tailwind config. We refresh. Still not showing a font base in there. That's because we took it out. Key, font, family, prefix, font. Font base, man rope, sans serif. And let's just see, is that applying up there? So when we see this, what we'll do is we'll quickly take a look down here. We see far font base is coming from there. Now we have our fonts coming through as CSS variables that we can use to write our CSS with. And that's what we wanted from that. So that was a simple change. And we can commit that. It's always good to kind of commit as we go. So let's just make a quick commit message here. I tend to prefer to commit via the command line. Let's just bring that up at the bottom. Okay, so we've got our application Tailwind CSS and our config.js. Two simple changes. Okay, and then we'll git add, make sure they're all added. We'll commit those. And what we'll do is we'll refactor. And we'll say add expose fonts as CSS custom property through Tailwind. done. Cool. Now, let's see. What do we want to do next? So we can focus on spacing and font size. That's probably a good couple of things to go for. I think so if we remember yesterday on Build Better Websites, these are the kind of 6 things. Utopia is the kind of tool that I mentioned about building out type sizing. And it's also the tool that they use on Build Better Websites, which you can actually see the source code of. And we're going to reference that quickly just to see how they're sizing token files. So that's the next thing we want to do. We want to be able to grab the sizing. Let's just close some of that stuff. Config. So we'll create a new sizes file, I think. Kind of following some of the ideas here. Spacing and text sizes. Let's perhaps maybe grab these and just see how they work for us. One thing I don't particularly like is like step 0, step 1, step 2. And I think when I used this kind of approach before on a previous project, let's just take a quick look at what we did. We did font sizes and we did this. In fact, let's just take this one. Done before. Then we'll create font sizes.json, paste that in, switch back, and we'll do spacing as well. And we'll customize these as we go, but just want to get the base kind of in place. And then we'll have a viewport as well. We've got our colors, font sizes, fonts, spacing, and viewports. We'll also now need our clamp generator since we're going to be using this. And so we can pull that in from our lib. File clamp generator.js. What the clamp generator does is essentially the code that Utopia uses, and it takes in our tokens in the format that we've set them up and converts them into CSS that creates a clamp function, and that's what allows it to grow and shrink the text relative to the viewport size. Okay, now let's go back to our Tailwind config. We'll now probably have to import our clamp generator. Yep, that's where that is. And let's just quickly check our Tailwind config in here. So we've got our Tailwind generator, our clamp generator rather. We're going to grab our font size and spacing tokens. We'll just copy this and then we'll figure out what we're doing with this stuff in a second. Yep, so raw design tokens. Grab that. Up there. And we just need to quickly get rid of this resources by the looks of that. And yeah. So what happens here is we import our tokens that we set up. We've got our font sizes and we've got our spacing. Then we're going to run those through the clamp generator that convert those objects with the min and max sizing into a single value, and with those min and max set as the clamp function, and then they come back and get converted into Tailwind tokens in the structure that Tailwind expects, and that then gets pasted down here so we can add our font size and our spacing as part of our theme. let's see what else they have. Spacing also actually gets a bit expanded, so I have these helpers in here as well. Help with some of those spacing things. So we have a 0, 1 pixel, 2 pixel, and a 4 pixel, since those things aren't necessarily available. And that looks like that might be the most of it. We have also got this plugin that we added before, and we'll probably use this, and that just adds padding, spacing, utilities into our CSS. We aren't necessarily going to use those right now. Flow space is something that's going to make a bit more sense later, once we start adding in some of our composition classes. So for now, I think we could have removed that in our last commit. We'll add these in because those will expose all of those things to our CSS. And then what we'll do is we'll go to our application tailwind CSS. We'll set the font size, and then we can do var font. Now, here's the question. What? Yeah, so it's just the font is just size. So there should be size base, because I believe that's what we called the font sizes. There's one called base, and that's 16 pixels on mobile and 20 pixels on desktop. Might be a bit too big for what we want, and we'll have to adjust things, but we refresh. Let's just see what we've done there. We've made a change to our Tailwind config, and is it still complaining? It's still complaining that the clamp generator doesn't exist. Lib CSS utils clamp generator. Is that not the same as that file there? Okay. What have we got going on? Cannot find module. Ah, it's not the clamp generator, it's this viewports one. And that's because the viewports is referenced here. And so we need to grab that file. Where are we? We're in lib. Is that config? So we're in CSS utils. We need to do another // because that will get us out to lib. And then that's the right place. So just reload that, see if that fixes it. There we go, much bigger text. Arguably probably too big. But what we'll see here, when we look at the font size, we'll see it uses size base, and actually the body sets size base, and that's set to a variable. In fact, if we look at our root in our CSS, you'll see that we've got space and we've got size and we've got all of these clamps that we can use to space things. And so that's what we're going to be using to space elements apart from each other. So when we look at our application CSS, we can, I don't think we actually have any padding right now or anything like that. But if we were going to add margin below a heading and overwrite some of that stuff, which we will do, then we can do that via those. I'm not so sure on these sizing right now. Like, I feel like small, probably like 16 pixels is probably our base font size on desktop, not the 20 pixels. This is a little bit too large for our kind of standard size. So I'll take a look at that. Let's see. Don't need that anymore. We can actually, that's Utopia, that's what I wanted. So our base font size here is a little bit large. We want to kind of bring this down. Maybe we'll do 14 pixels on mobile as our kind of minimum, and 16 pixels on desktop. And type scale, perhaps we leave as the default. How does this, so 320 pixels, what's our viewport sizing? max and min that we've set in our tokens, 320 and 1350. I think 1240 is probably okay. It just creates a narrower space, a narrower scale. So smaller becomes 12 pixels, 11 pixels. They get quite close. Size 1 is 20 pixels, so what we've got right now. Size 2, 25, all the way up to size 5, which is 48. And that probably feels acceptable. Like for a marketing website, we probably want our font sizes to be bigger. But for the actual application that we're building, we probably want them to be generally a bit of a tighter range. They don't need to be quite so, quite as much contrast between them all. If we visualize the scale, that's what it looks like. So 0 is this one. I feel like this isn't necessarily a good indication of what it looks like with our font, so but we'll see how it works and what it looks like. One of the things I need to do now is trying to export this, and that's a bit of a pain because what I need to do is have these out like this and take this into spacing. In fact, let's have a separate view over there with those in. And so not spacing, font sizes. So base is 0. So we're doing 14 to 16. The small becomes 11.67 to 12.8. This extra small becomes 9.72 pixels to 10.24. Yep, that should have been a period, not a forward slash. The large is 16.80 to 16. To 20. The extra large is 20.16. It becomes 25. 2XL goes to 24.19 to 31.25. 3XL 29.03, 39.06. The 4XL 34.84, 784 to 48.83. We don't have a 5XL right now, and I don't know if I'll need it, so I'm going to get rid of it. We can always come back in here and tweak these and adjust them if we want to. We can also adjust the type scale, so that's quite easy to do if we wanted to kind of increase the font sizes up in the scale. That's quite easy to do. Instead of 20, it becomes 21, then 28, 37. And when we preview that, you can see there's a much steeper range in the scale. But on mobile, as you shrink the screen size down, obviously that range becomes a lot reduced. Let's see. So let's refresh, see how that looks. We'll go back down to kind of a normal 16 pixels and we'll adjust this. At the moment, this is larger actually, the H1. So obviously the H1 has its own font size, which is 2EM. And one of the things that I want to do is adjust that so that it kind of meets up with the... And what you'll notice here with this is the font size shrinking on the body, but not necessarily on the header there. And so we'll fix that up shortly as we go through that stuff. But yeah, we've got our kind of tokens all working in there. Let's close all of that out. We don't need to save the changes on that. Quite happy with the scale there. See, what did we change? We added our font size base. We added all of our tokens into our Tailwind config and exposed them. We updated our kind of config there to bring that through. Our font size config is in there, our spacing config is in there, our viewport and our clamp generator as well. So add all of those things and we'll commit. And what we did was I haven't added any new features really, so really what we've been doing is doing a lot of config stuff right now. Set up design tokens with Tailwind. It's essentially what we've been doing. So we'll commit that. And yeah, nice. Okay. What do we want to do next? Next in our kind of list is setting up our CSS folder. So we've set up all of our tokens. Now we can use them in the CSS and we want to follow Cube. And so one of the things we want to do there is go up to, we already set up global. And what we'll do is we'll create some new folders. Working and streaming at the same time. Yes. Hey, Ray-chan. Yeah, this is just I've got some time off. I'm away from work at the moment, so this is a kind of personal project that I'm just working on, so it's yeah. What was I doing here? So this is going to be our composition folder, basically mirroring this compositions blocks. I'm just going to pull that to one side and create this folder structure. Compositions. Well, now you get to see what I do. I just create folders and blocks, utilities. And that's kind of the core of the styling that we're going to be doing. Everything's going to fit into one of these folders. We've already got global in our reset. We'll have some base kind of CSS in there. And actually that's where we'll start moving some of this stuff out. So this body is really part of our base, and so is the paragraph, and so is the image. Although I wouldn't necessarily want those. That image needs a bit of a class because it's very specific in what it's trying to do. And actually some of this stuff as well is probably specific to that page. And so let's pull some of that stuff out. This stuff all makes sense as a default. Margin in line doesn't make sense as a default. We're going to screw around with that page a bit for a second. And then I want to try and keep that stuff. Hero page. Perhaps we do that. And then on the hero page, we'll also have the paragraph have margin in line auto. And then we'll also say that the hero page image. Now those aren't going to apply. We're going to have to go to. That's interesting. There's no point adding that class here because that's going to apply to every single page. Does rail, how can I get the name of the controller in a Rails view? It's just controller name. That's what I thought it was. So I can actually just give this the class in here and pass in controller name. And what that's going to do is we created this welcome controller yesterday. Maybe it's not controller name. Expecting end controller name. Yeah, so that's not actually in there. Didn't work. Yeah, I think it's not. I don't. Ah, I see the problem. That's the problem. I missed the closing. That looked weird. Now it's huge, but that's because our hero CSS isn't actually applying. But what we've got is welcome, and what I can do here is just do welcome controller, perhaps, and then rather than hero page. Select all those. We can call this welcome controller and then apply that, and those CSS will apply. Cool. The image now looks bigger, but that might just be me. It is still applying those CSS properties. That's fine. And actually, let's maybe consider how we start using some compositions in here to build out that approach rather than using all of this CSS. So we're using a lot of CSS here to do some stuff that actually is like first thing we're doing is covering the screen. And so let's just go to what was it? It's on the Every Layout website. There's an approach called the frame. I don't think it's the framing. There's one called the cover or the center. The cover there we go. That's the one that I meant. Cool. So what we really want to do here is generate some CSS that we're going to use. And it's going to be this. We're going to call it cover, the centered element, the element that should be towards the vertical center. Class is not supported in this generator. I think we'll just take this and then we'll figure out some of that detail as we need it. But we're going to create a new composition called cover, and I'm actually just going to use it, I think, to begin with and see what it looks like. What it's actually doing, so this sets display flex, it's a column, the min block size is 100 VH, so it's going to take up the whole viewport, and it's going to add a 1 rem padding, which actually we don't want to use that 1 rem padding because we have our spacing. Now, what was our spacing tokens that we set up? We've got small, medium, large. They said 1 rem. 1 rem is going to be equal to the font size base. So that's actually like 16 pixels on our desktop. So small is probably what we're going for here. Spacing dash small. And we'll carry that through here as well. So we've got padding. That's around the whole box. That's going to make sure that our text never really touches the size. Then we've got our margin block. The stream okay today? I keep getting spikes that keep dropping and then looking like it's pausing out the stream. But anyway, then we've got margin block around all of the things that are inside the cover. Then it says the first child that's not the H1. It says I think this is assuming that there's stuff in here that kind of other stuff that might be at the top, stuff that might be at the bottom. And I think in our case, really what I want to do is just have the stuff in the center. And so I don't really care about that. Let's just see what that does. Let's take the background off there because we don't really want the background to be blue on every single page. We're just kind of building up this page and keeping it as it is. In fact, let's just maybe adjust the screen here a little bit so we can see those things side by side. And okay, cool. So the base, we've taken off the background, or we should have, providing everything's working. Unless we've still got it in here. Yeah, we still have this body in here, so we can remove this because we've replaced that. Now, let's go to our show partial. And what we'll do here is we'll add a class of cover. We'll see what that does. And then we'll set the BG porcelain 200 or whatever it was. It was 100. So now we know that actually, like, and this is how these utility classes and these composition classes come together. Rather than having this on the body and having that welcome controller CSS that was very specific, we can create our div and we say cover and we know that it's going to go in there. One of the things we'd like our cover class to do is space it in the center. And so justify content center should get us that. And it does. If we shrink down, you'll notice that we do have some spacing still applied actually, but perhaps we want to increase the spacing on our cover. If we go to our layout, computed, our cover doesn't look like it actually has that padding applied. Spacing small apparently isn't I think it's space small. Yeah, that just popped in a bit there. So it's not spacing, it's space. And that's defined in our Tailwind config. So if I refresh that, and then we bring that down. If I shrink this down, you'll notice actually the text now doesn't come in quite so close to the edge of the screen, which is what we want. And that actually is not far off what we want there to be able to get that next stage. Now, the next thing that's probably, let's just unpop the dock here. So we have our cover. It is display flex, and we're doing justify content center. Now, one of the things I don't particularly like is how the paragraph has a bunch of blocked spacing, and that's this. And actually, I think we can get rid of that. And that gets us much closer to what we had before with our utility class of cover. Now, what's the next thing? So we actually don't need this at all because our welcome controller CSS can go. But it was doing some stuff. So it's doing some sort of like text align center. Is probably the thing that's mainly in there, and align item center was also in there. Again, text align center, I'm okay with like text center. Or is it? Yeah, text center. Brings all of that into the center. And at this stage, the utility classes feel fine. If I'm building up a bit of a block here, then like text center and the porcelain 100, if I'm starting to add too many of those utility classes, then I'll turn it into a block. But for now, I think that's fine. The other thing that might worth considering turning into a block at some point is whether these classes down here are getting a bit much. I've got too many kind of sub elements that need styling as well, then it might make sense as a block. With the image, that part might be the bit that makes it a block. But let's take a look at what else we've got. We've got our paragraph, got margin inline auto. Do we need that? So our paragraph has moved off to the left. And that might be something that covered by cover. Like if we align the items into the center as well, that solves that problem. And kind of cover is basically we want this to cover the screen and center everything in the center. So that feels appropriate. So that means we can get rid of that. And the last thing that we've got here is our image. Now, if we remove that, what's the effect? The image gets huge. And so we've got a couple of things here. Margin inline auto, is that really needed? No. Block, is that really needed? No. Object fit, is that really needed? It probably is, because no, that seems okay. Like, we don't need the object fit. So really what we're saying is we want the kind of size to be a square. Now, does Tailwind have like a square size square? Like, do we have like a... I mean, we can do something like this. I guess we'll just do that, perhaps. And actually, why not? Why don't you just do width 25% here, height 25%, and then it was actually 50%, but 50, and then I can get rid of that. And now we've cut down the amount of CSS. We've got this one cover class that we can use in the future for other situations, and it's not conflated with the background color or any of the stuff that's going on inside. Our code in here for that place also looks cleaner. I think one thing I'll do perhaps is just jump back to this. We don't need to add this class, and I think having that class probably creates some bad habits. We might need it at some point for something, but for now we don't. And yeah, the next thing I want to probably take a look at is a kind of composition class called flow, and also setting the base of some of this stuff. I want to quickly check the base of the project I worked on before. Accidentally scrambled that file. Not that one. Global styles. Variables. Reset. Fonts. Styles. So padding bottom. That's fine. We don't want to do any of that stuff. H1. Size XL. So let's maybe do some of those things. Let's set our H1 size to font size var size XL. Doesn't look particularly big, does it? 3XL. Remember, we went up to, I think we went up to 4 or 5. Did we have a 5XL? No, we didn't. But if we do a 4XL, that was our like largest font size. And I quite like that. That looks good. Our paragraph, I think we can have a line height of 1.3. Bit too tight. 1.6. I'm going to boost this up to like 85, I think, or maybe 75. One of the things we can probably do as well is have a... actually, for this text here, because it's part of this hero piece, one of the things I want to try and do perhaps is just add a class to it called text balance. Is that going to work? Is it in there as that? CSS text balance. Yeah, okay. So it's text wrap balance. Does Tailwind have text wrap balance? It doesn't seem to. But that's fine. Let's just create our own utility class. So we've got utilities down here, and we can do text balance. .css. Or text utilities maybe. Got text balance. And then it's text wrap. Let's import that in the right place, which I check our kind of project from before. Utilities get included just at the end here. We'll import utilities slash. Now what's interesting actually is I've added this composition CSS here, and it's including it, but actually it's not including it as part of our Tailwind config. Now, is that a problem or is that fine? We're not actually. That's interesting. I'm going to come back to that in a second. There's something I've just noticed there that is interesting. So there's our text balance class applying, and what it does is it just balances out the text. And now that I'm looking at it, that font size is probably a bit too big, and perhaps we should probably focus that in. We can always override it with our kind of font large or whatever. Is it text large? So we can always do 2XL as like the override. And this is the nice balance of you can actually override these things quite easily. Our H1 is by default the largest font size, and that makes sense. We can always override it quite easily with a quick utility class. So we'll bring it back down to 3XL for this case, and perhaps we'll adjust that thing later. Now, the thing that I was starting to notice was actually it doesn't matter if I don't actually need to import these things. And that's because I've got two separate CSS tools going on in Rails. And so what's happening is this Tailwind CSS is getting compiled and built. And equally, our application CSS automatically includes any files within the style sheets folder in Rails. And so is that fine? That's probably okay. Once they get built into the page, they're all sharing the same space. And so that saves me actually having to create and build these in the right format. You're free to add application mod styles to this file. They'll appear at the bottom of the compiled styles. They take precedence over the styles defined. That is the only concern, the order of the loading. But actually, when we actually look into the code that's being loaded into the page, we are getting our kind of application style sheet is there. And is it just the one style sheet? We've got interfont, Tailwind. So Tailwind's loaded in there, application's loaded in there. It probably makes sense. Maybe that's fine. Require self, require tree. Perhaps there is a way that I can control the order and sequencing of the folders at the very least. Let's just take a quick look at that. We'll create a new chat in ChatGPT. Hey, I'm using Rails. I wondered how I could configure the application.css to load folders of style sheets in a specific order, perhaps with require tree. So at the moment this says require tree and it's got dot, but yeah, that's what I was figuring I could probably do. And require self is itself, so I can kind of adjust the order of the sequencing of some of the stuff. And so let's just quickly do that, because this does have a bit of a sequence. And so let's do that. Now, what's the downsides of this approach and not having it all parsed by Tailwind? I can't use some of the Tailwind like at apply. I'm generally avoiding that though. I think we'll go with this approach and just see, right? So we'll require tree. We'll do require tree global. Require tree components. Is that the next thing? No, the next thing is like our blocks. Require tree, no, not pages, compositions. Require tree components. We don't have components, we have utilities last. And then we require self. So we require everything from the global folder, everything from the blocks folder, everything from the compositions folder, everything from the utilities folder. And we require ourselves. And that feels okay. And so we don't need to worry too much now about the structure of some of that stuff. And then when we load, require tree must be a relative path. So these all need to be dot slash, dot slash, dot slash, dot slash. There we go. Cool. Let's see what's next then. Where are we at? Kind of, we've done a lot of stuff, so I want to check in, see where we're at. How's everything? We've updated our application CSS because we learned that actually a lot of that's in there. We removed all the junk from our Tailwind CSS. We added the cover utility class. Kind of started setting up some of these base elements, and we added our text balance utility. And we updated our kind of show, welcome show page. What else is in here that I might want to grab? We've got some like link styling, H1, HR rather, some stuff like that. Don't want that, that's all fine. Interestingly, I noticed as part of this, we didn't remove the default margin on this new reset. It kind of keeps the default margin. So this has margin beneath it or above it. Where is that margin coming from? Oh, so it only resets the block end, which makes sense. That's kind of how flow works as well. And you'll notice there that that one has margin on the top. And so that creates a nice default. I think what we'll probably do then is still have our flow utility though. Now, flow is a utility that I've used here, and the way it works is to do this. flow space, or actually I think in here what we're going to use is 1 rem. Now flow space was actually the other plugin that we didn't include in our Tailwind. It's flow space property down here. And so it probably makes sense to bring this plugin in now so that we can control our flow space with a utility. Let's grab that. Go to our Tailwind config. We don't know what row P is. We don't have row pad at the moment, but we have flow space. So we'll add that in. And now in here, one of the things we probably do as well is we just do space MD or 1 rem. I wonder if that works. I don't actually know. So lights are going off. Spacing. Smallest are kind of 1 rem. So let's just do small. And then 1 rem can be our default. So we're saying, hey, we'll use flow space, but if flow space isn't available, we'll use space SM. And if that's not available, we'll use 1 rem. And what this does is we'll add this to our parent, and then all of the directly descendant children that have a preceding sibling will get a margin top applied equal to this flow space. And if we come back to master minutes, we will check our show partial, cover, flow. And so some spacing did jump around there. Our image tag got some margin. What shouldn't get margin actually is the first element. And this is where it probably makes more sense to me to have margin block 0. Because I don't want that first element to have any margin unless flow is giving it. And so that makes more sense. And I think it's interesting actually looking at that code that that reset CSS obviously is slightly different. And I do wonder what else we might come across there. They add default H1, H2, H3, H4 texture wrap balance, so that's what we want there. Cool. So we'll leave that like that. Now we've got our cover utility, our flow utility. We'll add more as we need them. We've got our base with some base font styling going on. And we've sorted out our kind of styles there. Does it make sense to turn this into a block right now? Probably not. There's enough going on. One thing that might be worth doing is actually we'll have our composition classes first, then we'll have our utility classes kind of second. So it's cover, flow, and one of the things that CubeCSS kind of recommends is kind of using characters that you wouldn't normally put in CSS to just kind of separate these and clearly delineate that they are separate. We'll see. I think maybe here it makes sense because it's quite long. But cool. I'm quite happy with that. That looks good. Cool. And then what we'll do is we'll refresh that. And what we'll notice is as we get quite large, that gets huge. Why is that so huge? interesting. It says with 50%, but to be honest, okay, it is percentage based. Feels like it's 50% of the viewport. I don't know, that feels huge. What? 50%. That's unnecessarily large. Let's do a class on it. And then we'll do max width. Now, I don't know how that's going to work out. I don't think there is a max width for Excel. Let's just do 500 pixels. And then we have kind of it shrinking as we go. I think because I've got this open, it jutters around, but cool. I think that's fine for now. Like this is okay. If this started to get any more advanced, that's where I'd probably turn it into a block just for this image. But I think that's fine. Let's check in. Let's commit and see what we've got. So we updated our application CSS. We've changed our tailwind. We've added our cover, our flow, base, our reset updated slightly. Added text wrap balance. I added our plugin for flow space. That was it. So the purpose of flow space is if I felt like the spacing between these items wasn't quite high enough, then one of the things what I can do is I can go to that show partial, and I can say actually I think flow space XL, and I can increase the spacing between the items with a simple utility class, and that just helps with that. So that's what that does. I think let's commit this. And yeah, what have we done here? We've kind of set up cube, CSS, style, structure. I think that'll do. Cool. And so what else have we got? So I think that'll do now for our kind of, that gives us a bit of a stable foundation for doing our styles from, that we can work on. I think the next thing that'd be quite good to do is to start building out perhaps one of the screens. We know that we, from our kind of board over here, one of the first things we want to do is be able to create a new meeting. So we need some sort of scaffold around meetings. And I think the quickest and easiest way of getting that going will be just to use Rails to generate that. And so I think what we're going to do is we've got a clear app. We can do Rails, G, scaffold. We're going to scaffold a meeting. The meeting has a name. And I think that's probably it for now. Like the meetings just have a name. They have recordings, but we're going to create recording as a separate thing that you create in the platform. Perhaps with its own model, or maybe as a column on meeting, but we'll do that as a separate piece. I think we'll scaffold meetings. So what running Rails scaffold does is that actually generates a whole bunch of code for us. A lot of this code we're probably going to delete because we probably don't need, but what we do have is, let's just see what it's created actually. So we'll create a meetings controller. And we'll look at the code, and then we'll kind of jump into what's going on in there. So open file. So we've got a meetings controller. This has the index, the show, the new, the edit, create, update. These are all different methods that we can do to this action, to this meeting, and allow us to kind of interact with the meeting. The meetings helper, I'm going to delete. I'm going to discard the changes because I just don't need that file. We have our meeting record. So this is an application record. We will need that. We've got a form for kind of editing our meeting. We'll see. We've got the meeting itself, which we can view. We've got the JSON version of that. Now, I'm not sure I'm going to really bother with JSON API for this just yet. That's a whole bunch of extra code that I'm going to have to manage and maintain. And so I'm pretty sure I'm probably going to discard this. If I do that, then I'm probably changing how some of this works. And it's going to simplify some of that code, so I think I'm going to do that. But we'll come back to that. We've got our edit page, our view there, our view for listing our meetings, our JSON builder, our view for new, our view for show, our show JSON builder. Over there, we've created a new route, which actually I'm going to move down to there. For resources, we've got our kind of schema change. This is actually going to modify a database. It's going to create a table called meetings. It's going to have a column with the name, and it's going to be a string value in that column, and there's obviously timestamps for when it was created and updated and stuff like that. We've got our factory bot creating our meeting with a name, and then it's also generated a spec which allows us to kind of write some tests for our meeting controller. Let's just see, now that we've done all of that, let's just see what it actually looks like in the platform. So it created a meetings route. That's going to ask us to run a pending migration on our database. That's added it to our database. You can see here, this is the UI it's generated. It's obviously not the UI we'll want, but we can click new meeting on the top right, give it a meeting name, session 1. We can create the meeting, we can edit, destroy, go back to meetings. Now, this does actually have a bunch of Tailwind written in it, but it's not using our grey color, it's not using our font. Kind of all of these don't really work in the same way anymore, apart from rounded and some of the values in there. So we'll have to write our own CSS there, which is fine. We go back to meetings, we can see our meeting, we can destroy the meeting. It says our meeting was destroyed. So now we've got our code for interacting with our meeting. I think first thing that I want to do is perhaps just cut out some of the stuff in here. So I don't need... I'm going to cut that out. Cut that out. Because we want to get rid of JSON. And we'll do the same here. What this code here is doing is it is the update, this one. The one before was the create. And so basically, didn't mean to copy that. There we go. So if the meeting updates successfully with the meeting params, then we'll redirect to the meeting URL with that meeting, and we'll give a notice saying that it was updated. Otherwise, we're going to render the edit screen and we'll say it was unprocessable. Same with the new. If we can't save it, we'll render an error screen. But we're creating the meeting as a new meeting in that case. And meeting params is equal to the params. We're only permitting the name property from being set. That's our only trusted parameter. And then, yeah, we've got callbacks to use these shared common settings in there. And that's set in there like that. And up here we have this before action that sets that meeting for all of those. So we've got that. Now we've done that, we can get rid of our JBuilder files because we're not actually going to be using them. This kind of changes on those JBuilder files. Oh, there's another JBuilder file. Get rid of that. Cool. Now let's create a file. In fact, one of the things I want to do, so we've created the meetings, and I'm going to change a bunch of CSS, I'm going to change a bunch of things, but while I'm running those things, I really want to check that actually I'm not breaking the flow. I want to be able to click new meeting, I want to be able to create a new meeting. See, I've already broken something, and I would have liked to have known when I broke that. It says I have an uninitialized constant meetings controller, and I must have accidentally deleted a file. I deleted the meetings controller file, and unfortunately that change was irreversible, so I'm now going to have to create that file from scratch, unless I kind of do this again. That's going to be kind of annoying, but Rails G controller meeting, maybe. And it obviously brought some of those things back, and it hasn't got all of our code in there that we had before. So now we've lost our meetings controller that had all of that code in that we just updated and formatted. That's kind of annoying. We've not done too much, so it's a shame, but let's just do git reset. Git reset head. Oh, is that? I want to reset all of these, and I never remember what the command is. Git reset. How do I do git reset and remove untracked files? Dash hard. Yep. So git reset dash hard. It's still. And then I'm going to do a git clean F. Still got untracked files that are there, but oh, an FD. Git clean FD. Right, we're back to here. And then let's just do our after our screw up. Let's rescaffold this. Hopefully that means our app now works. It now says there's a pending migration. It might do that. That's going to be annoying because I didn't roll back the database. Rails DB reset. We haven't really got anything in our database, so we can just reset it anyway. We ran a migration and then we deleted the code, so then it lost how the migration worked. And so we couldn't roll back our migration. And then we can't migrate forward because we've now got new stuff in there. Rails DB migrate. Can I do that? Okay. And now if I refresh, it's not running because I've closed it. Bin dev. And acquire tree must be a directory. I'm a bit confused. It's a little bit odd. What have we changed here? Like, there's not actually... Oh, I've really screwed up my directory. Nothing's changed there. Like, nothing that should be doing with this. Assets, builds, tailwinds. That file is there. Or a tree must be a directory. Compositions, global, blocks. I cleared out blocks. And that's why, because there we go. Cool, that was so what happened there was when I did the clean and then reset the directory, this folder blocks needs to be kept. And so usually people add this .keep file. And I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to add keep app assets. And what we're going to do here is just like commit that directory. Keep blocks directory. Okay, so what happened there is that blocks directory got deleted when I cleaned out the working directory, and then that caused application CSS to kind of complain because this wasn't a directory anymore, and so it couldn't require that as a tree. And yeah, so now that directory's back, it's fixed. Now I've got my meetings controller again. I'll try not to delete it this time. I'm going to quickly just try and get this back to what it was. Go, that's the destroy. That just simplifies some of the stuff that's going on there. And then in our source control, or actually I'll do it through here because then it will avoid me accidentally deleting the wrong thing. In our views, meetings, we can get rid of any of the files that are called JBuilder. Delete JBuilder. Delete JBuilder. Cool. And I can still go in here, I can still create a meeting, and I can edit the meeting, I can show the meeting, I can destroy the meeting, and it all works still fine. Now, what I was getting to though, and actually it was a good demonstration of, I could be doing something really simple on here. I could just be changing the style of a button, and I could accidentally make that button unusable or break it in a way that means people couldn't create meetings anymore. And so what it would be good to do is to write a test. And so I kind of prefer to be lazy, and I don't really want to have to write this test myself. But we have our spec directory down here. We've got our factories and our models. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to ask ChatGPT to write me the test. So let's go to ChatGPT. Hi, building in a Rails app. I just ran what command did I run? I ran like Rails G scaffold meeting name. And now I have scaffolded the meetings. Can you help me have RSpec installed with FactoryBot? You help write the system test to ensure that the So we've got our meeting spec and it's going to write its code here. I'm going to let it build that out. Let's talk about spec system. So we've got spec system / meetings spec RB. That's singular meeting. Is that what they called it? Meetings. I think meeting probably makes sense here because it's meeting spec. Then what we can do in here is we can do, how does it suggest we run our test? How do I run the test? Undo exec RSpec. Just RSpec? Yeah, okay, fine. Spec system meeting. Let's see what it does. And it says here that it try to click on destroy. And it couldn't find it within meeting. So it created a meeting called Team Stand Up, and then it visited meetings, and then it tried to, but it didn't, there isn't a destroy button. So if I create a new meeting here, test, create meeting, if I go back to the meetings page, you have to click on show this meeting first before you can then destroy this meeting. So that's why that one worked. If I put an X there, would it allow you to create the meeting though? Did that one work? So we skipped one. Did it allow the user to create a new meeting? Temporary skip to exit, 2 examples, 0 failures, 1 pending. So did this one work then? It doesn't look like it's in 10. 1 example, 0 failures. Fine. There's no failures there, so I guess that worked. It was just this one that's not working, and that's because you actually have to go to the meeting ID URL to click on destroy. And so perhaps we just do that. Visit the meetings, meeting ID, click on destroy, you accept confirm, click on destroy, and then you expect the page to have that, and whatever page you land on not to have that. And if I run the RSpec test again, still fails. Not supported by base driver. Okay, well, I don't really want to spend too long running that, fixing that. So let's just copy this and tell ChatGPT, like, hey, you got it wrong. Yeah, I was thinking about this. It's not our Rails helper or our spec helper is I'm not sure what it's using, what current driver it's using. let's just quickly reference something. Let's see. Have we got anything about capybara? Capybara in our here? Be. No. Let's try that. And then let's see what happens. So if we check, let's run again. What it should do is it should spin up Chrome somewhere. Because we are requiring the Rails helper. The Rails helper is there, and we should be setting this to Selenium Chrome. But that doesn't seem to be working. And default driver Selenium Chrome. There is a headless version. Chrome. Where Chrome is loading, I've got too many windows open. Is that why? Because Chrome just had a little pop-up then saying it needed to... I don't want to set it as my default, and I don't really care for sending them stuff. Fine. And quit that now. Can I now run my test? Interesting. What did they say here? I didn't actually read. So it does say driven by. Do I have WebDrivers and Selenium installed? That's the first check. So gem file, they should be because I Aspect Rails, Capybara, WebDrivers. The Selenium WebDriver in there. Bundle, add bundle install. Okay. Was there something in the meeting spec that there we go. So this is because the code they wrote forced it to use the rack test one, not what I wanted. There we go. So there's Chrome loading. You can see it kind of going through the flow and then closing. And you can see here that it ran into an error. There are a couple of errors. And actually this is much more like what I expected to see rather than the rack-based one. So I got a failure. Let's just go for the line 10 one first, see if... Actually, it won't be line 10 anymore. Okay, well, it ran anyway and it sounded like it was fine. Line 10 would have been inside the one. It's like line 6, technically. Creates the meeting, closes, clears it out. And it checks that. This one allows users to delete a meeting. There's 16. And 16 fails because why does it fail? Because it goes all the way through the flow there. It looked like it actually worked. It got one failure and one other error. So it was unable to find the link or button destroy. Now, well, it did destroy. I think it's on about this one. Yeah, line 25. Like, there's no double destroy. So perhaps it's more like that. Let's just see how that runs. Obviously, it still goes through the flow. It pauses, which means it gets stuck at the end. Unable to find modal dialogue. It does pop up with an accept, I think. Does it not? When you go into destroy, no, it just destroys straight away. So actually there is no accept confirm block. There's no confirmation step there. And so that's one of the reasons that that fails. I know, now it passes. The other reason that this error looks so large is because, and I remember this now, actually, when let's take a quick look. There's a specific issue I came across, and we have to turn off a screenshot, I believe. Although one of the things that this person's done is added a little helper patch. And so I guess we'll do this now instead, because this looks nicer to do. There's an issue in Rails and RSpec at the moment where there's an error, which becomes a little bit verbose, unfortunately. But let's minimize that, close that. Spec, RSpec, screenshot, helper, patch, RB. Paste that code in there. That patch, we're then going to require it, and we're going to use that in our Rails helper. Is there already a RSpec configure down here? Yeah, there is. And what we'll do is we'll just include that, and that just patches that in. Since in RSpec Rails, we already set the current. I think that's just an example. And so let's jump back here. Let's see what happens if I run that now. I want it to go back to failing, so let's put this back in and assume that it's going to be some sort of accept confirmation modal that we need to accept. It failed, but now the error message is a lot cleaner. It says it can't find the dialogue. It also adds a screenshot image, and we can see what the failure looked like and what the screen looked like at the end there. And cool. Obviously we don't want the accept confirmation. We can close that. We can run all the tests. Now it goes through that really quickly. It's 2.5 seconds, and obviously kind of annoying having that pop up, but what we can do is if we go into Rails helper, it should already be the headless one. So I don't know why that runs like that. So I've configured it correctly now, and it uses Chrome to run the test. But it's not headless. I'm on a Mac. Now, I don't think I need to do that. That seems a little bit weird. Perhaps this isn't even being applied, and that could be something to consider. Jumping around too much, sorry. Yeah, I wonder if it's even being applied, to be honest. I mean, if I take this out, I comment it out, is it still the same? Yes, still the same. So there's a good chance this file here, in the way that it's working, isn't actually taking effect, and the thing that was in here before, driven by rack test, could perhaps go like that. Well, obviously now I have to come back down here and fix that up. Meeting spec. Yeah, so now it's run headless. It took a lot less time because it didn't need to spin up all of the window and UI and GUI to do all of that stuff. Cool. Interesting that that wasn't working, and perhaps because I needed to put it somewhere else. And perhaps I do it like that rather than because I always want to use this as the thing, so we'll add that in there like that. And we don't need this bit, and our meeting spec, we don't need to add that in manually for those. That's not what I wanted. Over here. Our rack handler, rack up. Is that something I can control? The rack up, rack? Our spec. Rails helper. Doesn't look like it. Let's just see what ChatGPT says about that. Bundle update, let's see what it says. Our spec and our specs still says the same error. The specs still pass, so let's assume that it's all good. That means we updated our gem file. I don't know if we actually need that in the end. Bundle remove Selenium WebDriver. Does it still work? Seems to, yeah. Fine, so we don't need that. Our gem file lock did update. That's fine because we bundle update. Our meetings controller updated, or that's new. We added our helper. We don't need that. We're going to discard the meetings helper. Added our meeting. Got a form, the meeting, edit, show, index. Those all fine. Roots, we just wanted to bring that down so it's in the right place. the schema was added, the meetings, the name, create that, update that columns, the migration, we update our Rails helper to include that patch, which we've got there. Got our meetings, factory bot. We can probably use Faker at some point for some of that. And fine, we don't necessarily need to. I just did RSpec. Does that do all the tests? Yeah, and it's got like this one pending test. Cool. And then that's the spec which we're using to test that we can create a meeting. So describe meetings. When you're managing meetings, allows you to create a meeting. Meetings new. Read this actually in a bit more detail because we've not looked at it. Allows you to create a meeting. They visit meetings new. They fill in the name with the team stand up. They click on the create meeting button, link, and then expect the page to have text meeting was successfully created and have the text team stand up written on it somewhere. It also allows them to delete a meeting, so we create a meeting with factory bot called team stand up. We visit that meeting, click on destroy. We expect that next page to not have team stand up and have the text it was successfully destroyed. Now if we just choose to change those things at some point, we can come back and we'll see them when the test fails. Is there like an RSpec watch or something? RSpec help. What do we have? Do we have some sort of like auto run type thing? I've not used RSpec too much. Doesn't look like it, but that's fine. Cool. Let's close all of this. Git add, git commit. And we're going to just say that we scaffold meetings. Now, it's just a temp folder. Now we've got our meetings. Kind of looks a bit weird. The layout. We need to kind of, and also clean up some of these templates because they have a lot of random Tailwind CSS in there that just isn't really relevant to what we're doing. I'm also seeing this H1 that's just massive and thinking that actually our kind of base CSS just needs to come down a bit to free Excel at least. But perhaps that's got 4 Excel on it as a hard-coded thing. Yeah, it does. And so let's look at some of our meeting views. Let's just take out some of this CSS that we've got going on. Because a lot of it, we just don't know what we want yet. I'd rather start with like something fairly basic. That's our index. If we refresh that now, see it says new meeting there. We'll go now into our new meeting page. Again, don't really need that huge class. Don't need this class. We already set our H1s to bold. We don't need to kind of manually do those. We render a form. Now fills the page. The form has a lot of CSS. And actually for large part, we want to style these labels and inputs and all of those just by using element selectors rather than classes. So that'll cover for the majority of those. So the name, we'll do stand up or something. We'll enter. That now takes us to the meetings view. So that's the show page. We can get rid of that. About the notice. I'm going to move the notices as well. I think that's one of the things that we'll probably do next after I've done this. Yeah. And this renders the meeting as well. So the meeting there that gets rendered is in here. Again, a lot of these aren't actually even doing anything because we've messed around with our tailwind so much. We'll have a H1, but we won't have that margin top 6. The HR, sorry. Back to meetings. That's that HR that was rendering. The edit page again. Basically the same. Okay. We've stripped back all of the styling. Now I don't really have an idea yet around how I want to style this. There's obviously some main navigation layout type things to consider. I've got the kind of blue color that I want to bring into a few places. Also, now we've done all of those changes, those are most styling changes. Let's just go to there and let's just run RSpec and just see whether that will run still correctly. Yep. Let's just do RSpec. Spec system as well. Like I just want to run the system tests. Cool. And we got green. Good there. That was it. So the notices are kind of randomly allocated at the moment. We've got one on the show and we have one on the index, but notices could appear anywhere in theory. So I'll take one of them. They're both the same. And actually stick that into our application layout. Perhaps we'll just stick it in here. At some point, we'll do some CSS on that notice. Yeah, does it make sense there? We'll add it here. So now it should still work. In fact, rather than going through all that, let's just run our system spec. We know that the system spec is checking for those notices to appear. The notices do appear. Right. Okay. So let's move that into there. Now, it might be a good point to check in. Check in what we've got so far. I kind of don't like the way that there's a div there. I think I know why it's like that. But what page is this? This is the show page. Stand up. We'll go to show. Yes, that's all fine. And we'll use a composition class to kind of stack those buttons next to each other, I think. But really, I'm just trying to simplify what's going on in these files. The show, the meeting here really wants to be like a H2 with the meeting name, perhaps. Doesn't make sense to have it like that. And so it shows there. It also shows here, and this is a thing, like this technically should be a H1 because this is the main focus of the page, whereas here it should be a H2, or not here, but like this page should be a H2. And this is kind of what's going on here with this, if it's an action name show and all of that. So maybe I do, like, if it's not else, perhaps I just bring this down. And then here it's H1. That's not right. This one's the H2. No. H2. H1. There we go. Then when you show, it kind of follows through correctly. Editing meetings, stand up, show the meeting, stand up, back to meetings, stand up. Okay. I think that makes sense. What next? I think our application really should put the stuff that's in the yield in some sort of main tag, and there I can have like some sort of padding medium, and that just brings stuff in. In fact, Excel, is that how I set that up? What spacing? Spacing do I have? I have like 5XL, 4XL. I think 3XL might make sense. Yeah. The other thing that I can do, I'm going to close all these tabs and get too many tabs. Here, this div has it renders meetings, so it's rendering multiple ones of these. And that could be interesting to add flow to if there were multiple meetings. In fact, let's just see what it looks like if I add all hands or something. Back to meetings. These HRs kind of create a nice separation, but perhaps if I add flow, just adds a bit more space. This needs spacing here. So again, class flow. I don't particularly like using the HR as a way of dividing the spacing there. So that makes sense. Show this meeting, edit this meeting, new meeting, meetings. I wonder if I just, as part of my base, I just set like H1, H2, H3, H4, color, bar. It wasn't porcelain, it's Pelorus. 800 or something. Just to add some color into this page. Quite like that. Now I'm thinking about like our buttons. Like I think our button class probably makes sense as like I think some of these want to be styled a bit more like buttons, especially new meeting. And so perhaps create a button block at some point. And also these buttons here need to look a little bit cleaner. I think I am going to do that as a block. And it's also going to affect just the base button. Not sure about that, but sure, we'll go with it. See what it does. What does it look like? Doesn't seem to have applied. We are applying it to there. And this is a button. Ah, is it? Or is it input type submit? Fine. So we should also capture input where the type is submit. Also, probably there will be some button input which is type button. And all of these want to be styled in this way. That is interesting. I think for ours, we'll just keep it with the color Valorous 700. Border radius bar space. I guess size makes more sense here. There is a whole thing about whether the buttons should have cursors. I feel like they should, regardless of all of the stuff that gets said about that. I think it's medium on here. Again, flow is something that I need to sort out on here, and the button sizing here is huge. What page is this? This is the editing page, so it's kind of part of the form. Below. I kind of want these to all be in the same line. And the pattern that every layout suggests for that is this kind of concept of a cluster. And so I'm going to quickly grab what they have here as their kind of cluster class, and I'm going to dump it in my compositions. That's a composition we're going to use. Space 1 rem. I'll probably want to have that as like cluster space at some point. Default of that really should be space medium, maybe 1 rem. If I just check our spacing, our small is the one that's kind of our 1 rem. But actually, I think medium probably makes more sense for some of this. And cool. And then this cluster really is for like, and this is where this kind of gets a bit tricky, because I want some of these things to actually be in here in this form. And let's not worry too much about the form just yet then, but maybe the show. This one here makes more sense. And so let's just see the show. No, not that one. Meetings. Div, or let's just select. Wrap with abbreviation, dot cluster. And then we'll refresh this, and you can see, kind of put these into a cluster. We will give these a class of button because we want them to all kind of look the same. Now they all look like buttons. They're all a bit too big and bold. We need a primary button and we need secondary buttons. And actually, some buttons we just want to look like text and strip away a lot of the styling from those buttons. But for now, I think that works. Kind of got this ability to do that. The other thing that we want to do in here is perhaps class flow. just so that we can separate the meeting away from the buttons. Edit meeting, name stand up, update, show meeting, destroy the meeting, new meeting. There's our notice alert at the top there. The spacing here is a little bit too wide. Is that because of button? Button does have margin. Shouldn't have margin because we want the margin to be controlled by other things that are outside. Font size really shouldn't be just font size. It should just be font size, or just size medium or size base, I think is the default there. And size base, okay. Or should I just do large? Large is definitely too small. Too large, rather. And that's too small. Small is a bit too small. The base is fine. Cursor pointer, inline block. I actually think this can just be block. I don't think it needs to be inline block, because of the parent being a cluster. And if I have somewhere where it's not in a cluster, doesn't seem to make much difference there. That's fine. There isn't an XS small. Let's just see what XS is. XS is a font size space. So it's 11 and 12. There is a 2XS. And that's 8. I do feel like the XS there, like the curved borders might be too curved, but 8 is good, I think. So this form here is used in two places. One of them is the edit, and one of them is create. So let's just take a look at both of those pages. So we've got the edit and we've got the new. One has back to meetings, the other has show this meeting. I think it would make sense to put those into the form, because the form can figure out whether, like, unless or like if meeting dot persisted. Back to meetings, new meeting, back to meetings. And now, because they're all in here, they can have the class cluster. They can all go next to each other. But when I'm editing this meeting, I've got the kind of cluster bit going on there. We want a hover state on our button as well. That's another kind of thing. I think we can probably do and hover. Background color Plura 600. It's kind of suggested that. I don't know how CSS nesting works on. I think that would do for now. I'm not spending too long really tweaking and refining the design here. I just want something that's fairly functional and looks decent enough as a base. And I think we're getting close. New meeting name, form input probably could do some work. Spacing around the button itself also needs to be part of the system, and the tokens that we're using, that perhaps is the next thing. These sizes here that are defined for this thing, 15 and 32. 32 would be a large, small, so small and a large maybe. So let's just do that for now. Spacing small, and then var spacing large. No. Okay. Oh, because it's space, not spacing. Keep making that mistake. Perhaps I should rename it. And again, all of these basically shrink down. So that's kind of the point here. Like a lot of this stuff, you'll notice that as we shrink the viewport down, the spacing gets refined and tighter. Text decoration center, text decoration none, display block, that's all fine. Border none, color white. That all looks okay to me. Yeah, I think that's fine. What I think I'm going to do, like, colon is one of these. And that still works. And it not have a class of or a data attribute of secondary or something, like data secondary or data type and the idea here is if I went on here and added a data type secondary, what I would get would be, I think here's fine, but like this screen here, this is chaotic. This is ridiculous. All of these are buttons or inputs, and none of them really need to be primary. And so that's part of the meeting partial, I think. It's these. Is it those? No, it's not those. What view is that? Yeah, this is the show, which is these. So I should be able to go on all of these and do data, secondary, type, secondary. And they all now have data type secondary set as their thing. And my button class is one of those, and it not have perhaps if I don't go the not there. Why is this one different? That's interesting. Because that doesn't actually have the secondary. So that's interesting. That's kind of what I would expect. But I kind of want to do like not have. Let's just do no chat GPT. CSS, how can I do not as that's what I thought. But perhaps I've done something slightly. Oh, maybe I didn't wrap that around there like that. Like that it's not. Oh, and then the button also isn't in there. So actually, the button. Trying to select button submit inputs, button inputs, and elements of a button class, but do not have descendants. Oh, because I don't want the has, right? The has is kind of irrelevant. Yeah, there we go. Kind of, because that button in the middle doesn't have a secondary, and if I edit the meeting, okay, that doesn't have the data secondary. If I went in here and just did data type secondary, then it goes primary, comes back. Right, cool. And then I can set a bunch of default styles that apply. What I'm kind of trying to do there is setting a default, right? So I don't have to set this like data type on all of them. And I think they talk a little about this in Cube FYI around the exception. Data state. Yeah, you shouldn't modify it to the point where it's not recognizable anymore. Like, actually, would it be better to have a text button kind of class or kind of block, I suppose, that defines some of that stuff? If I did the is, but that's something I want to check because I'm using a whole set of CSS selectors now that so not pretty well supported actually. Is also pretty well supported. I mean, IE can go screw itself, but everyone uses Edge now anyway. Like if I did usage relative, like who cares about this 0.37%? And I can come back and fix it really if I needed to, but for the most part it'll still work. It just won't necessarily look like the buttons will still be buttons. They just have the default browser styles, so it'll look kind of like that. I do feel like I need to set some base styles with perhaps this. Like, I just need to reset. So display block is going to be on all of these anyway. Cursor pointer going to be on all of them anyway. text decoration, text align, center. Probably makes sense on all of these as well. So does the border. Like, I don't really care for having a border on these things. And if I refresh this, what I'm doing is getting rid of a lot of this stuff. If I set the background color transparent as well. Again, kind of clearing out some of that stuff. Text decoration. Maybe it should be underlined by default. And then maybe the color, like color, font size. Again, that's one that should just be in there. The background color, the border radius, the color, and the padding definitely all feel like things that are unique to the primary button. Color, I think we do need to set like a default color, which is like var porcelain, color porcelain. 800 was it when we were using as the default kind of font background color size? Oh, so then if I edit the meeting, have that. This now does need the text decoration, none. Show the meeting, edit the meeting, update the meeting, back to meetings. This needs a cluster just to separate the spacing on it. So let's just go to the index. Actually, it's the meeting underscore meeting partial. Div cluster. Right, separation. I kind of wonder if it needs a bit of like a class flow perhaps on here as well, just to separate. Flow space needs to be smaller though. Maybe even 2xs. Did that actually? Yeah, that does have a property there. But now it feels like the text of the show meeting, edit the meeting is closer to the stand-up, which means that the index, no, maybe it is, yeah, here. Flow space large. No, that's not right. Increasing the meet space up there, but actually flow space isn't really working how I hope, because it kind of affects the wrong thing. Really it wants to only affect the children within, not the thing itself. Unless I just use it in a different way, actually. That's the other way I could think about it. But I kind of like thinking about it like that, so let's just see if I can not tailwind the file itself, but what we're going to do here is we're going to just modify this utility it creates. I think it needs a space and then just do star. XL. Yeah, because it's now adding XL to all of these. And actually it's kind of... And then this cluster here to XS. But here's a problem, because actually Excel is trumping on the okay. Hey, how's it going? Zavi boy. Thanks for tuning in. Just a minute, is that like a meeting tool? Yeah, so building something that's essentially going to take a recording. Oh, I added a weird border to this whole page. That's not intentional. It's going to take meeting recordings and turn them into meeting minutes is the plan, using a combination of AWS Transcribe to kind of turn the recording initially into transcript, and then going to use OpenAI to turn it into minutes. And yeah, thanks. I actually didn't kind of mock this up with DALL-E using ChatGPT as well. So using lots of AI stuff at the moment. Yeah, it's kind of prompted this. I have a bit of an idea at some point to turn this into a bit of an animation where I've got a little fav icon that's more of a square, rounded square off image. Am I a web dev professionally? Yeah, I've kind of been building products and software for kind of the last decade or so. Yeah. What about you? Are you into web design development? Do you do it for work or? Nice. Yeah, I've done some iOS stuff. I've done kind of mostly React Native in the past. But yeah, iOS is a cool platform. Working on a running app on the side. Nice. What does your running app do? What's special about your running app? I like to co-code with people on Twitch to support each other. That's nice. Cool. Live virtual runs. Nice. Yeah, I've not really been streaming much. This is kind of... I streamed years ago doing a few video games and stuff, and I've got some time at the moment, so I'm kind of building some stuff on the side, and I thought, why not stream it? Every half hour you can join a run and it's live. That's quite cool. A little bit like Peloton kind of group, but obviously with Peloton you need the bike, but kind of running together. That's pretty cool. I need to get back into running. It's getting cold again. It's harder to get into it. What was I doing? I was changing the spacing. That's what I was doing. So this 2xs between the items, that looks right, but then this is too large now. And so large, still quite big. Interesting. I don't know what the space was before then. Seems to work. Cool. So we've got this. I want to make that one a button because that's like the primary thing on the page. So let's just add the class of button to that. That's a huge button. I think that's because I took display block rather than inline block, and I think what I'm going to do is just put it back to inline block just so it works nicely on those bits. The other bit that I could probably do here is cluster it because it's now kind of a bit too close to this. I think it makes more sense to have it maybe over here. That might be a bit too far, but let's just see. That works. I wonder about having it like spaced apart, a bit like this. So maybe I could add that into our composition class of cluster. Perhaps I do like cluster data justify space between. I could do it like this. The other option I've got here is just to use a utility class since I've got Tailwind there. So I could do justify between. And this might be where we run into the problem about the order of these things. Yeah, the utility classes need to be loaded in after. Need to be loaded in after Tailwind, because otherwise our application CSS takes precedence, and actually I want the utility classes to be overriding that. That's kind of annoying. Perhaps I could make use of layers. Might be an option. This comes back to this problem that I had earlier where I have two separate kind of ways of pulling in CSS. I have this way, which is kind of Rails built in asset pipeline. And then I've got Tailwind being kind of compiled and built. Now that I can technically use I'm adding this to a long list of prefixes now. So if your username is Josh, every time you load the app, your profile will show Jovial Josh, and the prefix will shuffle each time you load. That's pretty cool. Yeah, it's like unique username type thing, or it's a little bit like the Pokemon. You come up to the characters, it's like Fisherman Steve or whatever, but obviously perhaps not kind of Fisherman in your case, but adds a little bit of character and tone to that. It's quite nice. Yeah, I'm doing something interesting with Tailwind. I kind of really like this approach that's defined in this Cube CSS guideline. So I'm writing CSS in this approach where I'm really focusing on using composition classes, utility classes, block, kind of this concept of blocks and exceptions. And really what I'm doing is focusing first on composition. So I have a bunch of classes that help structure, which are essentially utility classes, but do more than what you might think of Tailwind doing. So I have composition classes for like cluster, which do this kind of common clustering pattern. I've got this cover class, and I've got this flow class as well. And they help kind of build the composition of the page. And then I use the utility classes on top of that to kind of build up most of the UI. So justify between, stuff like that. And then I use blocks to actually kind of define things like buttons. So rather than having, like, if you tried to create a button with Tailwind CSS, you end up with like all of these things would have been, I mean, I'd have had to write class with like color. It would have been like text, Pelorus 700, border, like radius, or like, I can't remember what it is, but border 0. You'd have ended up with a pretty long line of, I think it's pretty much figured out what I was doing there actually. Some of what I was doing, plus all this stuff. So would have been quite long, and actually I can just use actual CSS here and use fairly complex selectors to kind of do some stuff, and also not just select like the button class itself, but also select the base elements like button and input. And these variables that are coming in, what I've done is configured Tailwind So my Tailwind CSS, Tailwind config file actually has quite a lot going on. My design tokens are all stored in JSON files. So I have colors, design tokens. These are my design tokens. So I don't use any of the Tailwind colors. These are my own colors that I've defined, porcelain and Polaris, that I'll add to. I've got a file for all my font sizes. The font sizes also are arranged. They use a clamp. So on a large screen, they can be larger, but as you shrink down, the font size actually shrinks down for mobile screens. All of that goes into Tailwind, gets turned into kind of used as the base theme for Tailwind. So I can use all of the Tailwind utilities. And then I've also got some plugins that expose those things as CSS variables. So colors, font family, spacing, font size, all of become available to me in the CSS that I write. So this space medium is coming from the token, which is also exposed in Tailwind. So it's a bit of a complex setup, but I actually really enjoy writing CSS in this way, where I can make use of Tailwind, but also just write regular CSS when I need to or want to. And yeah, so that's all cube.fy. A lot of those configurations came from Andy Bell, who wrote the stuff around Cube CSS. He also built this little website that's fully responsive, but uses no viewport elements, and it kind of links to all of these tools and techniques and stuff. Every layout has a lot of the composition classes. Utopia has the scaling. Will it mostly be blue and white like your logo? I haven't really decided on the colors yet. I'm obviously kind of pulled the blue in. I feel like I need to get another color in here at some point. I don't know what yet though, so still playing around with that. The plan, I've built a bit of a Miro, so I've got a bit of a flow that I'm working towards at the moment. So this is the flow. So I'm just kind of getting it functional to begin with, and then I'm going to spend some time on the design a bit more. Font, I'm using Manrope at the moment. It's just one of the... I tend to flicker between Manrope and Inter. Haven't really put much thought into the font. It's just a nice font that I quite like using at the moment. I started using FigJam, so I can stay in the Figma ecosystem for design and flows. Yeah, I like I've just been using Miro for so long. The other one that I tend to use is OmniGraffle, which is a little bit more harder to use. It's a bit more advanced, but it's all built into, like, it's all Mac software, so harder to share, but kind of has offline mode capabilities and stuff. Not that I often need that. I tried using Helvetica Neue for a font as my app. Yeah, that's nice. I like Helvetica. Helvetica is a good old classic. Had a weird thing with the number 1. Sometimes fonts can have different styles for the numbers as well. There was some odd padding to the left of it that made everything off. Yeah, what's the CSS font numeric? There's some sort of numeric variant that you can change. I don't know what this would be like in iOS, but a lot of fonts have different styles that you can define for the numbers. So you can kind of define whether you want tabular numbers. Often, actually, if you're stacking numbers up next to each other, what you want is tabular numbers, because sometimes they'll have weird padding or spaced differently. Whereas the tabular numbers make sure that all of the number widths are the same. But yeah, I don't know what Helvetica Neue's font is like for some of that stuff. I'm sure there is something like that. Let's see. ChatGPT is always a good. Does iOS have some equivalent to font variant? Merrick. It'll figure it out. I'd be surprised if it doesn't. Also, why is ChatGPT taking so long? Probably because the font variant numeric. That's what I meant to say. Yeah. Yeah, system font's good on iOS anyway. Like, I think most apps probably just use the system font on iOS. Yeah, UI. It's definitely more work to get it. CSS is nice. Right, where was I? I was edit, show meeting, destroy the meeting, back to meetings. I was trying to decide whether to move this over there. That was the problem I was running into. I think for now, let's leave it and I'll come back to that as like the next thing. I kind of feel like I've got a bunch of stuff in my kind of working directory here that's still in progress. So as I click through, it looks inputs is probably something I need to figure out. Let's close all of that again. Go to index quickly. Get rid of the justify between. I'll deal with that later. Have you thought about what you use for the back end? So I'm building it all in Ruby on Rails at the moment. That's what I've been kind of become my default. So yeah, it's all on Ruby on Rails. This is what the application's in at the moment. I've done a lot of Node stuff in the past, but I've kind of lately been really enjoying Ruby as a programming language, and Rails as well has a lot in here that it just gives you. When I first came across Rails like several years ago, I was a little bit put off by a lot of the magic that it does. Like, there's a lot of stuff that just happens for you and you're like, I don't know what's going on, but kind of come back to it and actually quite enjoy it now that I kind of realize it's not that magic. It's just some code that I didn't understand or didn't look at in the past. Yeah, it's going to be Ruby on Rails as the back end, and then for the front end, it's all mostly going to be kind of Hotwire, Stimulus, Turbo, which have some approaches in there. Yeah. I find it a refreshing change lately from React and kind of Python or some of those kind of largely complicated stacks. Where I'm having to do a lot of kind of boilerplate work to get stuff plumbed around. Yeah, I'm very vanilla on iOS. Nice. Yeah, I feel like there's a bit of a trend just going back to simple and boring. I keep hearing boring stacks and like boring stuff that's boring seems to be in trend right now. I haven't decided how I want to do these inputs just yet, but I'm just gonna throw in a quick base style for inputs. I think input border 1 pixel solid porcelain 500. Is that what style is actually applying to this input? Okay, maybe it is applying. Border radius, we'll do var base small. I feel like it's not applying those. It's definitely not applying that. Why? What's trumping at the tailwind? It's also overwriting the border color. I think that's because I've got a plugin on Tailwind that I don't want. Forms. I don't want Tailwind forms getting in the way. And I probably don't necessarily want typography either. No, because I'm gonna... Okay. Let's reset some of that stuff. Cool. It kind of did have some stuff in there that actually was quite nice though. But I'll deal with that. Do a bit of a reset on the tabs. Clean, tidy. Kind of didn't want to do a massive departure from what they had as the default there. That might make more sense actually. I kind of like, rather than the border approach, maybe we just do background color. Obviously not that color, that's a bit much. 200. Padding. Now I did something for the button actually, so let's just grab the button class. Grab the same padding. Might reduce it. But... yeah, definitely reducing that. 2XS and maybe medium. Maybe just 2XS all the way around. Maybe 100 there. Ugh. Yeah, I kind of like that approach. Let's see. Back to code. Kind of need to put these side by side, I think, rather than jumping, because I tend to do this thing where I keep jumping too quickly. Okay. I'm gonna have to probably wrap it up soon, I think. Perhaps in the next half hour or so. How long have I been running? Almost 3 hours, 15 minutes. Let's see. I kind of want to get to a point where I've got most of the styles, kind of the base styles set down. So let's go on all hands. This input, I think it needs to be. I feel like maybe I probably do need slightly more padding left and right, maybe. But maybe not that much. Yeah, that works, I think. Nice. I don't know what to do about the label, whether to have it above. I think it probably makes more sense above. I definitely need like spacing. Perhaps I can just throw it in a cluster for now. The form. That helps. I think as soon as I add more inputs to this form, it probably is going to look a bit weird, and it's going to need some more, like maybe a block defined or something for form inputs, groups or something. But I think for now that probably works. The notice, I'll come back and style it later. I'm not worried about that right now. Got like a red. I need some sort of red color. I might just grab the tailwind red, maybe the default one. Yeah, perhaps we just grab that tailwind red. So if I go in the tailwind config, one of the things I can do in here, colors, red can be const default theme, colors.red, and then I should be able to go to our button, and I should be able to do like a and dot or and data type equals how do I want to structure the buttons here? I want kind of this to be what's the word? I can't think of the word. How to have a button it has a type could be destructive, be primary or secondary, so it's kind of, yeah, I'm trying to design a system. Might have a destructive yeah, maybe it's just like data destructive and data destructive. Cinnabar. I don't have Cinnabar, but we do have red. Cinnabar would be kind of cool though, as a color name. Let's just go to the show. Destructive. I'll just do that. Data destructive. Okay. The color red isn't used in there. I thought it might expose it if I did that, but perhaps not. Is that because I need to reload this? Oh, there is a cannot confer an undefined or null to an object. It's just console.log default theme.colors red. I actually think it's theme. Whatever the colors. Cannot destructive property colors as of undefined. Is it what? Red. Is that how that works? It says it's a function. Default theme. kind of wanted to just cheat and use their colors while I could grab it, but how can I get the default colors from Tailwind in the config this? Do they have Tailwind CSS colors? They do. And they have the reds. For some reason it logs it out 3 times, but hey ho, that's fine. Let's throw that in there. Does that now work? It's done. There we go. And perhaps the edit is actually the primary on that. So I can get rid of the data type secondary. So it becomes like edit the meeting, destroys the meeting, back to meetings. Update this meeting, show this meeting, back to meetings. The back to meetings, I feel like at some point I'll put a back button at the top and we'll get a bit of a design system in place for the actual navigation of the app, and there'll be a UI for that. But generally, as a principle, I tend to start in the center. Like I want to start with the core thing and I'll design out from there. And so I'm starting from the center here. I'm just doing design work on things that are like core to it. And then I'll add some of that stuff in and that stuff will move and we'll get to it as we get to it. I'm quite happy with the kind of system that I've got here and the base styles. I think there's some improvements I can make definitely over time. I think actually one thing I just want to do there is maybe the color on this. Var color. I wonder about Elorus here. 800. No, that's too much. There's too much going on. What's going on there? What's wrong with that N? It looks so weird. Bar size base. And actually, I wouldn't mind. There's something going on there with the... What's going on with the font size? Why is the font size not increasing? I think the reset CSS is loading first. Again, like application CSS require I just require that first, and then it recognised that the rest of it's already there. That looks like it's worked. I don't know if it's requiring it twice. That would be annoying, but it needs to do the reset before it does the base styles. And I might have to come back, and actually that's one of the things I'm going to have to do, I think, is fix the... I'm going to merge these with the Tailwind and just have one config for CSS. So base is fine, I think. The outline ring I probably need to come back and do at some point, make that the Elorus color. Cool. I'm quite happy with where that is. Let's just check on the tests, make sure the tests all run. They should all run. I've not changed anything really in the HTML, just changed the styling. Cool. I do wonder actually, like if I accidentally went just actually no, it's all disappeared. Like if I screwed up in the CSS, would that break the tests? Looks like it has. Yeah. So it can only click on things that are visible. It has to be a visible link. And so that works quite nicely. Cool. Let's see, what have we got here? We've got 12 files we've changed. Let's just review these. Application CSS, we moved our reset up just to make sure. We added our button CSS, our little button block that we've got, and we kind of got destructive mode and hover state and stuff like that. We added our cluster composition. We changed up our kind of base styles with the input. Got our application, did our notice there. I've stripped back all of the old Tailwind defaults and used our clusters and our flow classes to kind of build up the UI there. Cool, looks fine. Flow. What was that one that doesn't have flow? That one. Editing meeting. Does that look different in some way? Edit meeting. Show the meeting. Edit and new. They both don't have it. I don't think they need it really either for some reason. Why don't they need it? There's space there. So why is there a space there? Is that just the default spacing? I don't know where that space is coming from because there's no margin on that and there's no margin on that. Does the input? Ah, the cluster. It's because there's a hidden input there, and actually that is taking the margin. The hidden input really ought to go at the end, maybe, or hidden inputs really shouldn't be taking the first spot because it means that the flow class treats that as the first item and gives the next item the margin top. Something to note, but I don't think I'm going to try and solve that right now because that's not a problem introduced by this commit, but there's a bug there. And we pulled in the red from Tailwind's default palette as well. And we removed forms and typography. I think one of the things we can probably do is npm install Tailwind CSS forms and Tailwind CSS typography. Cool. And then I think we'll commit that. We'll use the little emoji. We'll use this one. Apply branded default or default styles or initial styles. Yeah, cool. Now we have our ability to create these meetings as well. So we've got our all hands meeting and our stand-up meeting. I think in our kind of next session, I don't want to spend too much more time on styling. There's definitely some stuff I can do. I'm going to add like image on the top left and logo and stuff like that. But I think I'd really want to get onto uploading the recording into S3, kicking off AWS Transcribe, going through a lot of that code. So I think that'll be our next session. Our next session is going to be focused a little bit more on actually kind of plugging in some of these tools, uploading file, I think uploading the file is probably going to be the next step. I'm going to have to get my hand on a meeting recording that I can share. Probably just use a podcast or something, maybe an episode of some random podcast that's online. We'll put that in there. But yeah, I think that's probably it for today. I think we'll call it there. Yeah, I think we'll... Next session, I'm going to try and upload a video or audio file of a meeting podcast and get that in a space where we can kick off AWS Transcribe. So we're going to be doing some of that stuff. Cool. Thank you for following again. I plan to be on tomorrow morning. It'll be a bit of an earlier session, I think. Probably 10 till 12-ish. So we'll probably only get a couple of hours tomorrow. We'll aim to try and start kind of video upload, recording, that sort of stuff. I'll have to do some research as well. I've not done much of active storage. I don't know if active storage is the best way. It probably is, I think. But we'll figure that out. Cool. Thank you again for watching, and see you tomorrow. Cheers. Bye.